Now, honestly, if you feel like you're stuck in your climbing in terms of physical might, allow me to introduce you 2 ways for you to climb stronger in about a month's time if you are diligent. Here we go. 60-degree climbing on system 4. The harsh and physical climbing on the 60-degree will build impeccable physical prowess. Though it may seem simple and burly at first, because it is more foot intensive than you think. If slab climbing is about having technical footwork, then 60-degree overhang climbing is about having brutally strong foot prowess. When climbing at such an angle, gravity isn't really helping you push your feet down into the holds. And if you just let gravity take over, you'll cut loose. So the way to counteract this is by actively driving your feet into the footholds. This is a very stupidly active footsie way of climbing that will teach you how to fully utilize the power of leg extension, resulting in very powerful body tension. But of course, probably the main aspect of climbing at 60 degrees is the epic powerful cut loose moves. Pop quiz. Is it bad technique to cut feet? 3, 2, 1. Not if you do it intentionally, resulting in more efficient climbing. Cutting feet will force your upper body to fully contract so that you do not fall when you swing. And since this is 60 degrees, more often than not, when you do cut feet, the swing's gonna be really big and really epic. And by constantly getting accustomed to catching these big epic holds, you build a habit called not letting go, which is pretty important for climbing. And when your feet do cut, you work the skill of very quickly reestablishing your feet upon the wall. I like to say that you can't climb 60 well if you don't know how to fully utilize your feet. Also, climbing on 60 is probably the safest form of climbing known to mankind, because every time you fall, you only fall like 1 or 2 feet. Not to mention the holds you hold at 60 are rather juggy because they are at 60. It is rather hard to climb on those tiny small crimps that you normally see on vertical at 60. And this means that there is less emphasis on really fingery holds and more emphasis on just really squeezing the living daylights out of bigger, juggier holds, which in consequence makes the climbing more about hand strength, arm strength, and back strength, as opposed to just focusing it on the fingers. Now, before you go ahead and say you are not strong enough to climb at 60, I'll just quickly like to toss out to you that there is no plan, there's no preparation that you can make in order to make 60 feel easy. You can climb at 30, 40 degrees all you want, as long as you want, but the second you hop onto 60, there's an immediate difference, as there should be. And one more thing, if you want to be a stronger climber, stop looking for the not strong climbs to do. That is not helping your case. You need to look for the most burliest, the most physical climbs to do if you wish to be able to become stronger. You will have to face 60 degrees head on and expect to fall a lot and expect to feel weak a lot, because it just shows you everything you're lacking. But you know, it's also a really good place to start growth. To implement this on the TB2 or other boards that are adjustable, there are primarily 2 methods. Method 1 is to climb the routes and problems that are already set at 60 degrees. And this works good sometimes, but a lot of times there's not a lot of problems. And method 2, and this one works pretty well. Inside the app, go to 20 to 30 degrees, and then sort by V1, V2, V3s, and then simply climb those climbs that are made for 20, 30 degrees at 60 degrees overhanging. Doing it this way, you won't have to come up with your own problems, and most of the problems that are set at V1, V2, V3 at 20, 30 degrees will pretty much work pretty well at 60 degrees as well, although some of them won't be exactly perfect because they weren't set for that angle. But this way, you won't have to come up with your own problems and be less of a hassle on your end. Now, after a month of doing this, you can expect to feel like a young god whenever you climb anything vertical to slightly overhanging. You will no longer be afraid of the angle or steepness on any wall of any variety, which is pretty good for that mental game. And quite importantly, you would have realized that the thing holding you back from getting stronger wasn't your lack of strength, but your lack of willingness to pursue it. And of course, obviously, you would have gotten very much physically stronger. The second way to get stronger, max isometric pose. If you want to increase the max amount of force that your fingers can produce, you have to constantly expose them to situations where they're producing as much force as possible. And thus, a max isometric pose is when you stand beneath a hangboard and you crank down for as hard as you can. This will usually be about 1 to 3 seconds of max effort before your power starts to decline quite sharply. Over time, you will acquire the sensation that you are literally pulling down harder. It's kind of weird to explain what it feels like, but you just feel stronger. Over time, you'll start to notice that your torso rises, your hips, your heels, you go onto the tips of your toes, until ultimately your body is completely off the ground. I won't do it now because I'm not warmed up at all. Now, max isometrics allows the climber a safe environment where they're able to pull as hard as they possibly can, over and over again without any particularly high risk of messing your stuff up. It's very important to note that when you're doing a max isometric pull, you are not trying to hold the position as if you were hangboarding. When you're doing a max isometric pull, you are literally trying to pull up and through the motion as opposed to just holding it in a static position. If this wasn't here and I was to perform a max isometric pull, instead of it looking like this, it would look like that. And of course, once you become strong enough, at some point in time, your feet will levitate off the ground, at which point in time, just simply hold on to like a 10-pound dumbbell and then repeat the process all over again until you levitate up off the ground with a 10-pound dumbbell, at which point in time you bump it up to 20 pounds. For implementation purposes, I recommend you do it both with a bent arm and a straight arm. Doing it with a bent arm will be much easier to generate force because you're using your entire arm and musculature to pull, as opposed to doing with a straight arm. All you really got is your scapula to help assist you with the pull. Feel free to use whichever grip position you want to. I do recommend running through a variety of grip positions though, just to avoid overuse and just to get the sensation of strength through all your grip positions. In terms of the edge size, I would say to use an edge size that's no larger than 20 millimeters because we really want to focus just primarily on the fingers. Implement approximately 3 sets per arm using both the bent arm and the straight arm pulling. Me personally, I always do my max isometric pulls at the end of my climbing session, but feel free to toss them in wherever you like. I wouldn't do it at the beginning, maybe more so in the middle if you're to choose an earlier point. Now, after a month of doing max isometric pulls, you will notice that when you're climbing, you're able to exert more force and your fingers will be more comfortable on edges in general. You will also realize that when you decide to try really hard during your climb, you're able to kick it up a notch as opposed to before where it just felt like you were just squeezing really hard and not much was happening. And you will have moments when you latch onto something and you believe that your fingers should have fallen off, but instead your body has gotten accustomed to trying really hard for 1 to 3 seconds in terms of max isometric pulling, and your finger will say, nah, I know this position. I pulled harder in a safe environment countless times in doing this. Even though my body's out of control, my hand is nice and solid and I will catch it, and therefore you'll be kind of surprised every now and then when you do this and you're like, oh, I'm gonna fall. Guess not. Now that was 2 ways to climb harder in a month's time. Remember, you must be diligent. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time, partner.